Today's episode is being brought to you by Diesel Fuel Prints. Diesel Fuel has been printing my stickers for about 20 years now. He's been in the business since 1991, and he is the highest quality weatherproof stickers you can get anywhere. Dieselfuelprints.com has easy online ordering, and you can get a quote on any size and shape sticker you could possibly want. Full color printing, as well as black and white printing starting as low as $25 for 125 pieces. Shipping's always free, and you can check that out at dieselfuelprints.com. And at checkout, if you use the discount code AWP2021, my listeners will get 10% off of their order. So yeah, check it out. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Anyway Whatever podcast. I'm your host, Mike Fisher, and today's guest is Dave Rose. Dave is a painter, and he works in the video game industry, designing the user interface for some of your favorite games like Guitar Hero, and he's currently working on the new Doom game. Dave's an incredibly talented guy. I am a huge fan of his paintings. He does these amazing robots. They're really cool. And, people from the old gigposters.com website will remember him as grfxmonkey. And me and Dave have been in contact for decades now, and it was cool to sit down and talk to him. He's a unique and interesting individual, a true artist all the way to the bone, and I think people are going to dig this one. As always, all of the information about the show can be seen in the links below, so merch, Patreon, information about the show and the guest, all down below. Check all that stuff out. Give us a like and a subscribe wherever it is that you are watching or listening to this show. And we'll get you right to Dave on the other side of this. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Anyway Whatever podcast. Today's guest is Dave Rose, and every single time that I do this, I always admit it. First things first is we already recorded a bunch of stuff and I screwed it up. And so now me and Dave have to do this again. Sorry, Dave.
This is familiar.
Dave is a painter and video game developer, and I'm a huge fan of Dave's paintings. And, we worked in the game industry at the same time, but we never worked together. Dave, give your social media shout outs up front so people can check out your work while we talk.
Yeah, grfxmonkey.com, Instagram.com/grfxmonkey, and Facebook.com/grfxmonkey. So
excellent. Everybody go check out Dave's stuff. His paintings are amazing. And, you had mentioned to me when we were talking that you went to school in North Carolina, and you're a North Carolina guy. Where did you go to school?
East Carolina University. It was it's a little it's a state university, but it's a little university there. That's good. It
wasn't an art school though.
No, it's a standard for college, state-run university. They have a really good arts program there. Although I was often not, my professors weren't necessarily a huge fan of all my comic book and fantasy art stuff that I did.
Yeah, there's good. Always that weird thing with fine artists who kind of look down their nose at the stuff that we do as like illustration, and it's not art. Yeah, I can imagine that was, that's kind of always something that people who do kind of more expressive art like we do, or actually no, I don't, not expressive, but more, kind of what's the word I'm looking for?
I don't know. They would always say
narrative art, narrative art.
They would always say, this is illustration, not art. And then we get in a debate about, I was like, well, the Sistine Chapel, what about that? Because that is very much like that was that was illustration,
Well, it was technically commercial art.
Yeah, exactly.
It was. I mean, it was like it was an almost advertising art, really.
In fact, I think he hated doing that, and the Pope was like, "Yeah, just get up there and finish that off." And he's like, "I don't even want to be doing this."
Yeah, I think that. I mean, yes, I do believe that is the story. Is that there was the art that he got paid to do, and then there was the art that he wanted to do, and that correlates to this very day for a lot of us,
Yeah.
and you even kind of touched on that a little bit, where you were like, you go to work every day and you work on your video game stuff, and then when you come home to paint, like you just want to paint something that's kind of fun and interesting, and it doesn't, it's like you have, as a creative person, we're kind of oftentimes forced into the position of doing that, like where you have some creative skills, but you have to find a way to make a living doing it. So you take jobs to make money, and then you're kind of on somebody else's dime a lot of the times to do that.
Yeah.
And we kind of end up making art that we have to go home and do what we want to do.
Yeah. I mean, my personal art is very much like it's for me, and the work that I do for a company is very methodical. One of the things that I do with a lot of my painting and music as well is it's very stream of conscious. Like I don't even have a goal here. I'm just gonna make something. Like when someone is just like, "What does this mean?" I'm like, I don't really know what it means. Like I'm just doing something because I need to make things. Like it's the core of my happiness and existence is to like make things and put it out to the world,
Yeah, totally, dude. It's that whole thing that I always say. It's like I just want to keep making cool stuff all the time.
Yeah.
I don't care that it necessarily has any kind of greater message or any meaning or anything like that. It's awesome that there are artists whose whole mission is to make art that speaks specific things. But I just want to make stuff that looks cool. And so I totally feel you there. And it's like, your paintings are frequently like robots and stuff that is sort of like this is just like a cool scene with like some cool characters in it, and no, there's no politics involved or whatever.
Right.
And I know sometimes you had said that you do, like, sometimes because you kind of stream of conscious create things, like sometimes that's where your consciousness is at. You know what I mean? Like for all of us, like sometimes the consciousness is something so big that's happening in the world that you can't not address it if it's what's inside of you,
Yeah. I mean, things creep in, but there's no, as I said a little earlier, I was like, I'm not a Rage Against the Machine painter. I'm not, there's no political intent or anything or even social. It's just like, I'm just making things. Sometimes things creep in, but the idea is just to make things. It's almost like, during this pandemic, which has obviously been really tough, like sitting at home, I've been using art very much as therapy, like it's,
Sure.
Like I just want to create something and, it's just to make something to pass the time, but also maybe make the world a slightly better place than what it currently is. I don't know. Just, like I'm going to put some positive thing out into the world. At least I hope it's positive. Put something positive out in the world and just, that kind of thing.
As a fan of your work, like you can't not kind of have a good feeling when looking at your painting, because they're like, I'm like always constantly trying to not put labels on other people's creative stuff. I can only express how I feel about them. And I don't mean to So if I use any words that you don't want associated with your paintings, I don't mean any offense by them, but there's a whimsical nature to your work that when you're looking at it, it feels fun. It feels, while it does not look childlike, it feels childlike.
Yeah.
It's like, it's like happy robots, like doing fun things.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
There's I can't remember the quote from Picasso about art and children, but maybe I should look it up. But there's this idea that art can come from this sort of childlike kind of place, and all that stuff, the creative process, a lot of it, like making music or art, has always been about like tapping into the inner child. As adults, we grow up and we sort of get forced into being a certain way and told we have to stay in this box or whatever. Like, so the artistic, for me, like a lot of the creative process is getting in touch with my 7-year-old self or whatever, like just having fun and enjoying myself.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I think that a lot of us can relate to that, who are artists, like even if you're not a professional artist, just somebody who makes art in their free time. Like, it's a cathartic process. I think for some people maybe it's not, like they're tortured by it. Right. I am fortunate enough that like I enjoy the art, the craft of making things. And so I don't have that crazy inner turmoil about it. I love doing what I do, and I like to paint and draw a lot. So I don't come from it from that same place. But you had mentioned that you one of the ways in which you started making art, even as a little kid, was you had asked your father to draw you something, and then you realized you could kind of do it better than he did.
Yeah.
And like for me, it was like my father was a fantastic artist, even though he never did it professionally. But like he would draw things for me when I was a kid. Like he would draw me a car, and then I would just sit and try to recreate whatever thing he had drawn. And I remember that like the first time somebody who was an adult looked at something I drew and refused to believe that I had drawn it. Because it was just too good. They were like, "There's no way." Like, I was funny. Like, "No, I drew that," and it was like, I remember like I had to, there are things in your life that you use to delineate how old you might have been when you were really little. And I remember we moved from the house I was born in when I was 7, and so it had to have been before I was 7. I'm guessing I was probably 5 or so when that happened. And just like, I remember even now, like that sense of like, almost like power of like, oh, like I can do something that creates this, this problem for this person to have to sort out. And then that was it for me. Like all I wanted to do after that was draw.
Yeah.
Trying to recapture that same moment.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that art, like going through sort of primary, middle, high school, being sort of this outcast, reject nerd, whatever you want to call it.
Also a common theme with us artists.
Yeah, art was one of those things that like people would just be like, but he's a good artist, and so I don't know if it was, I still do think it was my love for it, but I do think it was kind of an escape to like something to be like, well, I'm at least good at this thing,
Yeah, well,
at least
I
can do this.
Yeah, dude, I think that that is also probably a fairly common experience. But just in general, like, one of the things that always kind of comes up on this show is like, like people who are musicians or are, writers or are artists. It's like, we find each other eventually. Like we always think we're the only one, like
Yeah.
I'm the, and then like, you get that copy of Juxtapoz magazine, or you see,
Yep.
some piece somewhere, or hear some piece of music, and you're like, oh, there's more of me. There are more of me in the world.
Yeah.
For me, for sure, like Juxtapoz magazine and like, like screen printed rock posters were one of those moments for me when I first moved to LA, where I was like, oh yeah, I want to do that,
Yeah. 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 So when I was first doing the work that I was doing, I had people just be like, "Oh, you got to check out this magazine," and I'm like, "What is this?" And they're like, "Juxtapoz," and I looked at it and I was like, "Holy crap!" Like people are doing stuff that I'm into, and I like doing, and that was a huge thing for me. Like it, just because I was just like, I felt kind of alone, and it's funny too, because when you see that as an artist, it starts affecting the art you're doing too. You see it and you're like, okay, I'm into this, and there's a lot of influence that comes out of that, but still think ultimately it's good to have that level of being like, there's other people that think like me.
Totally. Like me and Dave know each other initially from the gigposters.com website. If you listen to this show, you are familiar with having talked with other guests about that. And a lot of us ended up with like kind of larger careers from either the art we made in the gig posters world, or the contacts we made through the gig posters community. And then I know that's kind of how you wound up in the video game industry, was from your gig poster work, and you were at Neversoft working on the...
I came into the video game industry before gig posters, but
right.
That was
Sorry.
the thing that, no, it's fine. That was the thing that got me like, what helped get me my gig at Neversoft. So I'd been at Red Storm, and I was doing stuff like military first-person shooter kind of work. But
I think I remember that now. For some reason, I think I remember you talking about that on gig posters, about your UI work doing that stuff.
And I had... So I had been, just doing basically like my paintings, like my robot stuff and all that stuff. And I had met some guys, and I'm from North Carolina, so Casey Burns and Ron Liberty, shout out to them. You should have them on here if you haven't had them.
I have not been in contact with Casey Burns in forever, and I absolutely love that dude. He's like super cool guy. So yes, like I would be totally
you
stoked
should have
to get
Casey
reconnected.
And Ron is a badass too. And those guys, like, they were just like, you should get on gig posters. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And they pointed me to it. And my brother-in-law had like a restaurant bar in Chapel Hill. Chapel Hill is a pretty good like underground music scene there. And I was like, I wanted to start doing some gig posters, and I started doing stuff for them. And most of it was like black and white Sharpie on like freaking typing paper, and I was just scanning in. And those guys were just like, I love that stuff you're doing. So it's kind of doing that for a little bit. And I started making friends with that community. I remember one of the biggest deals in my entire career was I did a one-off painting poster and posted on gig posters. And Frank Kozik chimed in and was like, this is badass. And I was like, that was a huge deal for me because I had idolized this guy. I was like, I went to record stores and see his posters on the wall, and I'm like, fucking Frank Kozik just said he loved what I was doing. It was like a huge deal for me. And so anyway, I developed a lot of connections through that.
I mean, validation from any, kind of gatekeeper person in any creative endeavor, that shit goes a long ways, man.
Yeah.
I mean, who doesn't want that?
Yeah. Yeah, it was a big deal. And so yeah, anyway, I had a lot of stuff on there. When I applied at Neversoft. I was watching when I was watching Jackass movie, and at the end they were doing mocap in the Neversoft studio, and I was like, man, that would be a good place to work as a game dev artist. And I sent out my thing, and then probably a year later, I got this random thing that was just like, hey, you want to come in for an interview? And I'm like, what? And strangely enough, at the same time, I had recently been accepted in La Luz de Jesus to do to have some of my pieces in there. So I was like, well, I'm already going to LA, so I'm going to go for this interview while I, go to this La Luz show. So that's how I ended up interviewing there. But
yeah, I tried to get in at Neversoft forever because they were in Woodland Hills where I owned a house and raised my family. And I was like a mile away, and I was in game development. And at the time they were working on the Tony Hawk Pro Skater games, and I just could never crack that nut. I could never get in there. I was like, yeah, I want to commute a mile every day instead of driving all the way to Santa Monica every day. For whatever reason, I could never get in there. But,
it's a shame because, man, like I said, you would have fit in so well there. Like, they would have loved you, dude.
Yeah, well, apparently not.
Well, they just didn't know. It's funny. I remember hearing a story about one guy who got hired. It was pretty early on. One of the art directors there, badass dude, Nolan Nelson. He was a big skater and awesome artist. And he was like, his interview with Neversoft was the guy who ran it, Joel Jewett, gets on the phone with him and goes, hey, do you like to drink beer? And he's like, yeah. He goes, well, fuck it, you're hired.
Well, yeah, again, if we would have had that conversation, I probably would have got hired.
Yeah, Joel was this, just amazing individual. So he's from Montana, and if you ever look up, he's got like this big giant mustache and wears a camo hat and has a mullet. And he's like, he would start his meetings by getting on the intercom at work and going, hey, motherfuckers. Near the end of work, he would just be like, who's doing shot tequila with me? That was his. That would be his announcement at work. Just like, yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. Oh, now it's even worse. I didn't get to work there. Yeah. So you were at Neversoft and you worked on the Guitar Hero games.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. I mean, what a huge juggernaut that game was. Changed American culture. I figured we got 1,000 bands out of kids who played that game and then went on to learn how to play actual instruments.
Yeah. Well, I was at Red Storm when I first played. I went to a house party and all these people were playing it, and I got on and I was like, why am I not working on this game? I was like, this would complete me as a professional. It was really like, I was just like, I should be working on this game. So I was geeking out about it. And then, like a year and a half later, I got hired to work on it as, eventually I moved into the lead UI role. And I was just like, this is crazy. I can't believe I'm working on this thing. Like, it was nuts. It's like, what? How did this happen?
How long were you at Neversoft and in LA?
About 6.5 years.
About 6.5 years. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing, dude. And like we hung out like one time
Yeah.
at a Kozagard show because I'm terrible about that.
Well, we always talked about hanging out.
I talk about that a lot with a lot of people.
We never did. But,
it's a common theme with people who know me. I get so wrapped up in making my work, and also
right.
to be totally fair to myself. Now that once I decided to quit the game industry, like 10 years ago and go full-time freelance, I couldn't afford to not be working. And be able to pay all my bills. So it's like, I just didn't have a lot of time. Like I quit being in a band. I quit doing anything, just because I needed to be able to be sitting in front of something and working on it to make money. Cause once you go full-time freelance, man, like, there's no paycheck coming unless you're working.
That's definitely been something that I like when I ponder it. I'm like, oh, that's kind of scary. What was your band? I'm curious because I know I saw you were in a band and
the last band that I was in was called DIS, and it was short for Destroyed in Seconds. And
nice.
It was one of those bands where all of my friends who were in like famous grind and death metal bands wanted to like start a side thing where they just played like kind of crust punk, get away a little bit from death metal and grindcore. And they're like, oh, you're like, you used to sing in punk bands back in the day. Like, you should be our singer. And I was like, okay. And then like, before I know it, we're putting out a record and we're touring all over the world. And I was like, holy shit. And that totally coincided with the first couple years that I was out of the game industry. Like the last year I was in games, the band was getting going. And then like, kind of like right as I was making my exit, we recorded our record, and then like 2 months after I finally left the last company I was at, we did a US tour, and then the next year we did a European tour, and it was super fun. I got to see the world with my best friends and drink a lot of beer, man, and have super fun times and play on stages with pretty much every single band that I've loved for the last 20 years. And I guess it couldn't have been a better experience.
Man, that's cool.
Didn't like touring. Like it got to the point where I just didn't want to be on tour anymore. And it was also the thing of, okay, you need to be at home working all the time. Like you can't lose 6 months out of the, or 6 weeks, 8 weeks out of the year being on tour when you're getting paid in beer and not money.
Yeah. I mean, dude, I had no idea how you make a living doing it. Like I was in a couple bands, and it was always
an expensive hobby.
It was always for fun, because the idea of like even making any money was just like completely out the window,
Are you playing in any bands now, or do you just do your own thing? I see videos every now and then of you like, with the guitar in your hands, and
I had a band in North Carolina that I was part of called the Totally Unstoppable Rocking Doom Squad, which was the Turds. We wore costumes and were ridiculous. And I had a band in LA for a little bit called Dr. Hump, which was again like wearing costumes and
Where did you guys play when you out here?
We would always play in like, there was this place in the valley. Where did we play? We played over at Palladino's, which shut down. There was a lot of cover bands.
It's still there. It's just called something else.
Oh, okay.
One of my first guests for the podcast was in a band called the Trans Sex Pistols, which were a drag Sex Pistols band, and they would play at Palladino's. And we've gone over that on this show. Palladino's, for people who are listening, it was like it was a place in the valley in Los Angeles where it was like mostly all like tribute bands, where it was like, you'd just see like Pantera, and it was like a bunch of dudes dressed like Pantera playing Pantera songs, or Kiss or Guns N' Roses or whatever it is, and the place was amazing. It was like kind of an ultimate expression of the San Fernando Valley. Yes. And it's like I live really close to there right now. Like I'm just a few miles away from there.
Yeah, we would play over there. We played at I'm sure you're probably familiar with Rock and Roll Pizza.
Oh yeah, dude, yeah, it's like really close to my house. It's not there anymore, but Rock and Roll Pizza was awesome. How the hell did any band fit in there? That place is tiny.
Well, they moved to this one place for a little while, and it was bigger. It had a stage and everything. But the guy who runs Rock and Roll Pizza, really cool dude. He had, he's one of those fun guys too. You talk to, and he knew like everybody in the music industry, but because he also was somehow affiliated with like the place where people would like come and gear up for a show, like they get like the things they were gonna wear or whatever. Anyway, he's a super cool guy. So we would like play there. We played at Palladino's and a couple other places when I was in LA.
Typical Valley spots.
Yeah. And then when I moved here, Texas, it's like I've been trying to start a band, and we just had some guys, and then the pandemic happened. So then I got a looping station, and now I basically sit in my house and use the looping station to try to make music, and I just post it online, and it's completely
Mark Ribbolette stuff.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
He's my inspiration, right?
That guy is the best. He's hilarious. If anybody who's not familiar, go listen to Mark Ribbolette.
Yeah, he's amazing.
He makes these amazing like one man band songs, and they're hilarious. So now I'm going to have to check out your little one man band stuff.
It's not that good. It's not It's not Mark Ribbolette level, that's for sure.
Well, everybody started somewhere. So yeah, you're in Dallas now, and you just finished working on the latest edition of Doom video game, correct?
Yeah.
That's so amazing, dude.
Doom Eternal. It's as I was saying earlier, it's like standing on the shoulders of giants kind of thing. Like you're like those guys were just instrumental, and it's really cool to work on something that, it's like these guys started a complete, they're pretty much like the Godfather's first person shooters, and to work on a game that was created by those is really cool. Those guys is really cool, and to like be involved. When I first started game dev, one of the big games I would play religiously was Quake. I was like crazy into Quake.
I was a total Quake guy.
And so I was definitely geeking out when I interviewed with them, because I was like, these guys made Quake and Doom. This is amazing,
So you did all the user interface design on the latest version of Quake?
Yeah.
Or Doom,
Doom, yeah.
How long have you been there now?
2.5 years. Yeah.
Yeah. How you like in Texas? First of all, it's weird. I end up having so mmany Texans on this show. Like it's like half of my guests are from or in Texas.
Yeah. Texas is interesting. Is because it's like, I was born and raised in North Carolina,
which is still technically the South, right? So it's a southern
and then
situation.
Living in LA, and I've said several times that Texas feels like a combination of the South and LA, and it's like there's what I really like about Texas. There's things that I don't like, which I won't even go into on here. But the things that I do like is one, they have really good damn barbecue, and I love barbecue. And when I was in LA, I was like, why does not anyone know how to make barbecue? Like,
yeah, you got to go down to South Central Los Angeles to get good barbecue in LA. Although, that's not like that anymore. There's good barbecue places all over in LA now. And yeah, that is like my hobby is doing, legit old school barbecue.
Oh,
And
really? Nice.
and I'm mostly inspired by Texas barbecue.
Mm.
Except for I do my pulled pork Carolina style.
Oh,
And
yes.
so
Yes, you should.
it's all vinegar sauce and
Yes.
my mustard sauce.
I applaud you, sir. That's how it should be.
And so it sucks that you never got to come by and partake in any of that, because I could have got a true Carolinian's opinion of my Carolina style barbecue.
We would make my birthday every year when we lived in LA. We would make some North Carolina style pulled pork, and people would come over and they'd just be like, "I had no idea that barbecue could be this good." And we were like, "Yep, this is how you do it, man."
Yeah, man.
We're not even that good. We're average.
That vinegar sauce, man, that Carolina style vinegar sauce, people don't know. People think that barbecue sauce is like, hickory, tomato based, smoky, but the real stuff is a Carolina like vinegar. It's almost like hot sauce. Oh, it's the best stuff.
Oh man, it's so good on pork. Holy crap.
Oh man. Yeah, it's like, I started, this is another gig posters thing where I learned from people that I knew from gig posters, and I just, Brad Whittle, who was known on gig posters as Whiskey Beard. He's an Oklahoman. He is like a competition level barbecue guy, and he basically taught me by phone how to do real barbecue.
Nice.
And he sent me some Carolina style, sauce. I can't remember the name of the company. And I was like, oh my, it was so good. I couldn't even believe it. And so then I would just order that all the time until one day I was like, I'm going to teach myself how to make this from scratch. And there's always a bottle of it in my refrigerator, and I just use it on whatever. And then I also taught myself how to make Carolina style mustard sauce. And I eat every single day. Like, I eat it on everything. I put that mustard sauce on everything. And my children are like, why don't you sell this? Why don't you figure out a way to bottle and sell this stuff? Because you'll make a killing. It's like the best sauce ever.
Nice.
Yeah. So yeah, I can appreciate Texas barbecue and Carolina barbecue. If you're gonna do brisket, you got to do it Texas style. There's no other way to do it.
That is the thing. Like, saying like, okay, so in terms of barbecue, North Carolina pork. North Carolinians know how to do pork. You cannot top, brisket wise, like Texas, they know what they're doing, man. They kill it. They knock it out of the park.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, dude, Texas is awesome. I'm a huge fan of Texas barbecue too. My favorite place on earth to eat is the Salt Lick outside of Austin. I love that place. There's so many good places that I've been to in Texas, like between Dallas on tour and going to Flatstock, South by Southwest, and all the places there are in Austin. Yeah, Texas barbecue is the jam. They know how to do sausage too.
Right. Yeah. You had a couple guys on from Austin. It's like, was it Bobby?
Bobby and Jeff Pivoto.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of those guys, I think I've talked to maybe a little on gig posters time. There was I actually, when I was doing gig posters, back in the day, some of the silk screeners were always out of Austin, and those were doing some of the work. I mean, I've never, like, I've hung out with silk screeners. I've always kind of envious of the skill set. But I've always just sent it to other people or worked with them to be like, I don't really know how to do it myself. So
yeah, I mean, that's how I kind of started making art for bands when I was a teenager. Is I got a screen printing kit and taught myself how to do it, and just kind of,
nice.
That was the beginning of the end of all that. But once I actually worked as a professional solo screener for a while, I was like, oh, I don't want to do that anymore. So when I got into doing rock posters, I always had all my work printed by somebody else.
Right.
Like looking behind you, You have a
Yeah.
couple Coop posters. Is that Electric Frankenstein? Is that a Lonnie Unitas poster?
Yeah, or this is Jerome.
Yeah, Lonnie.
Yeah,
Lonnie Jerome.
That's
I love Lonnie's work, man. That dude is hilarious.
Yeah, both of these are him.
Awesome. And then of course you got those Coops.
Yeah, there's a. It's like if you look up, there's a Jermaine poster.
I have that one.
Yeah, over there is like there's a Ron poster. There's I have several of Lonnie. So
yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, Jermaine's going to be on, and we were talking about, it was like similar with what you were saying, where it's like, that day that you walked into the record store and it was like, like I can do that. I want to do that. And then there was a bunch of us who are of a similar age, we kind of figured out in the mid 90s, like, there's like more people who are doing this stuff. And like you'd see Kozik posters and Coop posters and Taz posters at the record store. And I know for me, it was like, I totally want to do that. And then I just happened that my best friend, who was also, shout out Mike Murphy, was, he's like a super high level screen printer, and he was already printing his own posters. And so, I just jumped on in there, and, it's like, so many of us got like careers out of that place, and validation from bigger artists that help us push our careers into other places. And it's rad that it ended up getting such a prestigious gig in the video game culture with the with Guitar Hero, and now you're working on Doom, and it's like it's crazy. It's crazy.
I mean, when I was hired at id, one of the big things that they said is they were like, we want you to bring a rock and roll vibe to Doom. And they would directly reference the work I did on Guitar Hero. And so I was like, man, I can owe all that really to like gig posters, because, it's like how much of my career was directly influenced by my involvement with those guys, and I think even my show at La Luz de Jesus was directly related to some of the people that I had contact with on that site. It's like that was a big deal.
Were you only in group shows at La Luz, or did you actually have a solo show there?
No solo shows, unfortunately. It was just group shows. I was working on it, and then as we were talking about earlier, the bottom fell out of
of the entire United States in 2009.
When the real estate market crashed, everyone was like, I'm not buying art anymore. And I'm like, I get it, but this sure does suck,
Totally. For people who might not be familiar, La Luz de Jesus is one of the biggest galleries in the country for like pop surrealism and like lowbrow kind of outsider art. And it's like, it's an institution in Southern California. And actually, it's funny that the guest who is going to be on the week that me and you are recording this, because I always pre-record everything. I'm like an insane person, and I record like 3 months worth of guests at a time, and then that's not enough. So once I started putting out episodes after like a few weeks, I feel like my well is running dry, so I start recording more people. So I never have a moment where I don't have guests. But the guest who's going to be on this week is painter Candy Wild. She's a lowbrow artist, and she's had work in there, and she worked for the Piz for a long time, for nice. Nearly a decade. And so we talk a little bit about La Luz de Jesus, and it's if I had a goal as an artist that I have not yet achieved, because I rock posters took me everywhere I ever wanted to go. I'm in a bunch of books that are in the Library of Congress.
I'm showing off your art right now.
He's wearing Dave's wearing a High on Fire shirt that I designed. If you listen to this show, you know High on Fire is my favorite band of all time.
Yes, for good reason.
They are, as far as I'm concerned, the best heavy metal band ever. But that is a different argument. But and work that I did for High on Fire, it was in the Grammy Museum. I've been in museums, and I've been, my work has been all over the world. And, if I could pick anything I have not yet achieved, it would be to have a piece in La Luz de Jesus. Like that's, it's one of those things where if you are a fan of lowbrow artwork, or you've been to Los Angeles or lived in Los Angeles, or a working artist, you know what that place is. And, for 25 years now, it's like, that's been a goal of mine. And, I've never tried, so I have nobody to blame but myself. But at some point, I'm probably gonna try to make like a legitimate effort to get something in there. So the fact that you've had something in there, that's impressive to me, and that is like, that's not something that everybody can say that they've done, and that's killer, dude.
Thank you. You talk about those moments, like those moments in when something you're doing and you're like the big moments I can think of, like one of them I was just mentioning is when Kozik, like I painted a poster and Kozik noticed it on Gig Poster and it was like, this is fucking awesome. And I was like, it's at the moment of feeling like I could die now, like, because this guy I idolized, said that he liked my stuff. La Luz was another one when I had working there 2 different times. The second time they were like, come and pick up your paintings. So I came out and I was like, I'm gonna pick up my painting. And Billy Shire, who's the head there, Billy was there. And Billy is classic Billy, like his long hair. He's wearing like a tank top, and he's just walking around like, "Hey, dude, what's up?" And
his flip flops.
And I was like, "I'm here to pick up my painting," and he goes, "Oh yeah." He goes like, "What painting is that?" And I was like, "Is that one over there?" And he goes, "I really like it. Can I keep it for a little while?" And I was like, fuck yes. I was like, you can keep it forever. I was like, I was just like, yeah. Like,
wow.
Yeah.
That's insane. That's amazing.
It's those moments, like you're just like, oh my God, this is so cool. Like, I can't believe this.
Well, as a fan of your work, that it doesn't surprise me. I absolutely love your work. And I remember I had told you this before, but I was like in a pizza place down the street from my house in Echo Park, and there was, art all over the walls. And I was sitting there talking to a friend of mine before I was on my way to a High on Fire show around the corner. And, which is funny. That's a funny segue. And,
nice. That's awesome.
I'm sitting there looking at my friend, Tom. He's eating a piece of pizza, and, shout out Tom Barnes. And I was like, that's a Dave Rose painting I'm looking at. It was like literally right next to his head. And I was like, hey, that's a Dave Rose painting. And I was like, how the hell did that thing get in here? And then like I took a picture of it and I messaged it to you. And I was like, hey, Dave, how did your painting get in Two Boots Pizza? And you're like, I have no idea, dude. I have no idea how or why that's there. It's just like screwed into the wall so nobody can steal it. And yeah, so I mean, I'm a huge fan of your cool robot paintings. And, another thing that we had kind of talked about, again, like people are probably tired of us saying that because we just had a 2-hour conversation that we're re-recording. But your newer work that you've been doing now that you started painting again, it seems to be way more detailed and have way more stuff incorporated into each piece. Before it would have been like maybe a figure or two, kind of doing a thing in the painting, like, one of your robots. And now it seems to be that the paintings are more populated.
Yeah. So it, the idea earlier, I was talking about how, you're a punk artist that eventually makes jazz music, and that's kind of what it is. It's like,
Right.
I
Like the greatest analogy. Like you're the best punk musician ever in your 20s, and then by the time you get to your 50s, you're playing jazz.
It's like Sting, who was doing the early Police, and then eventually he's like, I'm just gonna make jazz. I mean, that the thing is, like, I'm just always trying to challenge myself. Lately, I've just been more into doing more complicated things, like challenging myself artistically. Actually, like for a little bit, I was trying to do this really high detailed stuff, and I realized that I was like, I'm not very good at this, and I don't enjoy it. So what I've been really trying to do is find out a way to trick the viewer, the viewer to sort of think that I'm doing something really complex, but it's not really complex. So like I've been doing these things where I've like a trick of the eye, sort of like I'm putting a lot of detail, but not really, That's been kind of my thing lately. Is like, so I'm trying to trick you and everybody else into believing that I put a lot of time into something.
Dude, your paintings are incredibly rich, though. Like they're just rich, just in the style that you paint. They seem childlike when you're looking at them, because they seem to they harken back to kind of like 50s, 60s, even 70s, like robot toys, and that's like a lot of that kind of stuff. And so the way that you paint them, they do seem like they're very complex paintings that have a very simple theme to them, kind of. I think that's one of the reasons why I'm a super huge fan. Is like I can just look at your paintings and like I just get a good feeling about what it is that I'm looking at.
Right.
And because sometimes that's sometimes that's what you want. You know what I mean? Like, Todd Shore, I brought it up before, but Todd Shore is my favorite painter of all time.
Yes.
Probably by a pretty wide margin.
Amazing.
And you could look at one of his paintings for an hour, and each, 4-inch square bit of one of his paintings is its own painting. And that has its place, and it's incredible. Then, somebody who does work like you, where like you get it all in one eyeful, that occupies its own space too. And I appreciate that as an artist.
My art director at Neversoft, is one of the founders, so he's rich, and he has this
all that Tony Hawk money.
Yeah. He has this incredible collection of art, and he has, he owns some Todd Shore paintings, and, my big influences are Todd Shore, Jeff Soto, those guys are just so good. And
like Ryden, Mark Ryden.
Yeah,
all those dudes.
Ryden is amazing. Like, and
Robert Williams.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the guy who established it all, right? And that's the thing is, what we were talking about earlier is when I started doing what I was doing, people were just like, look at these guys. And I'm like, I had no idea other people were doing this. And then I'm like,
they even have their own magazine.
And I'm like, God damn, they're doing a lot better than I am. I need to learn something from them. You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
But I had no idea, because I was living in my little bubble of where my art school teacher would get upset if I did something that was comic book related and be like, this isn't real art, like, well, I like it,
Yeah, I had an art teacher in high school who I credit not just as being a very important art teacher, but he was an important adult figure in my life at a time when I didn't want to listen to any adults. And he more or less changed my life as a person. When I was around 16 or 17, I went from being like a homeless street punk to going back to high school to try to finish. And so I went to like a continuation school, and he was one of the teachers at that school, and he happened to be to handle the art classes. So it was like, you know, when you got to the elective part of your day, I would go into art class, and pretty quickly, you know, within the first week, he was like, oh, wow, okay, you have some skill. Like, you're one of the kids at this school who has a potential to be a professional artist down the road. So he took me under his wing. And even though he was almost all positive, he was an asshole for sure. But he would routinely, if I try, because, like, you know, I'm Skull Guy. Like, I've always been Skull Guy. I'm, to this very moment, I'm Skull Guy.
Skulls are cool, man.
An entire living off of being Skull Guy.
Skulls are cool.
But, you know, if he caught me drawing 3 skulls in a row for projects, he'd just walk over, take what I was doing, tear it up, and throw it in the trash, and be like, okay, you're doing something else. He wouldn't let me rest on my laurels when it came to that stuff. But yeah, it was like the same thing. Like, sometimes he'd be like, you have to stop doing illustrative art and try to figure out how to make art. And I was like, that's not what I'm interested in. Like, I want to make skateboard graphics, and I want to, you know, I never wanted to be a comic book artist because I was just never a comic book guy. The comic books that I always liked were like, you know, they were like the underground comics, you know, like I liked like the Freak Brothers and, you know, Cherry and, you know, all of that kind of stuff. That I never liked superhero comics. I liked Jeff Darrow comics, you know, I like that kind of stuff. And, but he was like constantly pushing me, you know, so I get it. Like what you're saying, like, that's not real life. Like, you know, everybody who's ever tried to do narrative art as fine art has run across people who were like, well, that's illustration. That's not real art. Like, I think Robert Williams, like, he talks about that kind of a lot, like in his books and like any documentaries, where it's like just trying to get through to the art world that you could do illustrative art and it was fine art, you know. And, you know, for me, like, there are 3 great American artists, like treasures of American art, and they are Norman Rockwell, Frank Frazetta, and Robert Williams. And I think that those are probably the 3 greatest artists America's ever produced. You know, you know, of course you have to, there's Warhol, you know, and there's, you know,
I would throw, Warhol,
you know, Rothko and people like that. But
I would say Warhol and Jack Kirby, actually. Jack Kirby.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, I don't think.
But I know.
I don't think you could make an argument that Kirby could be a fine artist. He was definitely an illustrator.
He was an illustrator, but
no less important.
Huge influence.
Oh yeah, I mean, like you don't have a massive part of American culture without Jack Kirby. You don't have the entire Marvel universe of movies that exist. You don't have the DC universe of movies that exist if you don't have Jack Kirby.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, but yeah, like, you know, just that thing, that the constant argument of, you know, what's art and what's illustration. And, you know, I had Isabel Samaras on, and she went to school to be an illustrator because, you know, she, you know, that's, and, you know, it was like a constant struggle, she said, with like, you know, she's like, oh, you know, she didn't know you could make a living at that. So she was a printmaker. Actually, I take that back. She went to school to be a printmaker, not an illustrator, because she didn't know that was a thing. And then when she was there, she's like, oh, I could do this. It's like,
you know, when I was in art school, I remember this hardcore resistance to, like, there was this really sort of angry backlash to being an illustrator and graphic designer, and everyone was just like, you know, you can't do this. And I don't know. It was this weird sort of feeling of like, I've somehow betrayed the art world, which was just weird to me. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm just trying to make a living, dude. Like, I don't understand what you...
Well, yeah, like the thing for me was I got accepted into the Academy of Art in San Francisco to do fine art. And then before I even went, I sat down and looked at the debt that I was going to end up with from going there. And I was like, the chances of me being good enough at this to be able to pay all of this back ever is pretty limited. So maybe I go to school for, you know, something different. So I went to animation school. I was like, I could work as an animator. I don't know if I'll ever sell a painting. That would just seem like a crazy investment. And then in the end, you know, it's like all I wish I could do was get paid money to paint. Which is part of the reason why I decided I wanted to make this YouTube art channel that I'm doing. Is I have an excuse to paint. Like I have to paint because I gotta, and it's like, painting is my favorite thing to do that does not involve a skateboard.
Yeah, there's this interesting, like, my wife and I, Gina, we talk a lot about like Generation X, and I know you're Generation X, and the idea of like, even though we were doing, I was doing art, I was always thinking about how can I survive on this? Like, there's this, because we were left to our own devices. It'd be like our parents would be just kind of like, well, figure it out.
We're both gonna go to work.
Yeah. And so there's this whole, like, when I went to school, I came in with the mentality of like, how can I make money doing what I'm doing? And first I was like, maybe education, and my parents were like, don't do that, because they were educators. And they were right, because I make a lot more money not being an educator. Like, I mean, working in game dev is much more lucrative, but
that is one thing I will hate on the game industry quite a lot, but I will never hate on the fact I was able to make a really nice living, and my children grew up never wanting for anything.
Right. Yeah.
It was good for that.
I am not going to complain about
myself. And I, with the exception of maybe a handful of people, loved everybody I ever worked with, and I'm still friends and talk to on a daily basis. 50 people online that I met from the game industry that I'm still friends with. So it gave me a lot in life. On this show, people who listen, they know that I was not a super huge fan of the game industry. It wasn't what I wanted to do with my time, but it was a way for me to make money. So I understand what you're saying. Like, and then like part of being Generation X and part of being like latchkey kids was like, and it goes to the thing you were talking about, when art school being like a rejection of illustrative art and stuff, Generation X, like that was our entire, how we experienced art was on Saturday morning, Saturday morning, or on the comic book rack, or on a skateboard deck, or all of these things that we grew up with where it was all illustrative art. We got a little bit of it from Dungeons and Dragons and things like that, when you get Frazetta work, or the Monster Manual and stuff. But that work was still pretty illustrative too. So there wasn't a generation of people who grew up on fine art. We grew up on Bugs Bunny and Scooby-Doo, And so imagine that when we all got to be about 25 years old, there were all these rock posters with all these Dayglow colors and all these cartoon characters all over them. Imagine the surprise.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when everyone asks me, it's like, what's your major influence artistically? I'm like, Looney Tunes, because it's absolutely like the foundation of my work is that. It's, the stuff that I was into, and, Dungeons and Dragons, like you said, heavy metal. I mean, I love album covers, but it's always like the heavy metal album covers was just like, I mean, I have one of my, actually, when I organized the heavy metal art show that you were in with Skinner and Martin, like those guys are, like, you guys are all just like heavy metal badass artists. And it was so much fun curating that show. And, and like, I love heavy metal art. And so I was just like, I want to do a show about heavy metal art. And Mike, I don't know if you remember Mike from Wootini, but Mike is one of my good old time buddies. You should have him on the show. He's a badass. But Mike is a really cool guy, and he made Jeremy's first toys, and he he worked with Kozik and all those guys.
I remember that Wootini.
Such a good guy. He's from North Carolina, and he he encouraged that whole show, and that was
when was that?
That's like, man,
I'm trying to remember when that
probably
was.
about 13 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, but Skinner was a part of it. I was at the same time I was talking to Skinner about doing some stuff for Guitar Hero, and unfortunately, Activision shut it down. But I was like, "You got to have Skinner, man. He's awesome."
Dude, that guy's gone on to. I mean, he's one of the big dogs now.
Yeah,
for sure, man. That dude's work is so rad. And there's been a number of times. I don't know him. It's like one of those ridiculous things where like we like some of my very good friends are also his very good friends, but I don't know him. And
I'm going to talk to Skinner, get him on your show, dude. You got.
Well, I mean, all I have to do is ask him. I mean, I know he'll be on. But there's been a number of projects over the years where I was going to get to do something, and then I found out that Skinner ended up getting to do it instead of me.
Oh, really?
So we're kind of. We're like in the same, we both do a lot of stuff for High on Fire. So there's been a lot of overlapping High on Fire projects where it's like, oh, we're going to go with Skinner's version. And that's, there's no sour grapes about that. Absolutely. Not only do I don't know how much I've talked about this on the show before, but one of the greatest things that I ever got from working in the games industry for so many years was absolutely no problem with rejection of something I've made. I do not, if I make something for a project and somebody doesn't like it or doesn't want it or goes with something else, I could not care less. And people are like, like people always try to tiptoe around saying they're not going to use something of yours. And I'm like, I'm not that guy.
Yeah, dude.
You be as brutal as you want to be. I don't give a shit. I have sat in rooms full of people shitting on my work for hours at a time. I don't care. I have no attachment to it. If what I made wasn't what you need, go use something else. I have no problem with it. And it's hilarious when people are like, yeah, well, I think we just kind of gonna want to go with this other thing. And, it's like, okay, fine. That's fine. Or if they're asking for changes and they're like, I'm like, just tell me what you need from me. Don't beat around the bush. I don't care. I'm not going to get hurt feelings,
Yeah. It definitely will make you thick skinned.
For sure. I'm thankful.
I get it.
I'm thankful for it, man. Like, like I do a lot of contract work, like this last year I worked on like for 3 different toy companies, a board game company and 2 toy companies. And it's like, please just tell me what you need. Don't worry about hurting my feelings about not liking what I've given you. Tell me what you need and I'll give it to you. Like, just managing people. And I understand. And I'd rather people err on the side of not being an asshole than just being an asshole. But like, with me, you don't have to kid glove me, man. I've been through the ringer for the last, professionally for 30 years. So, whatever.
Yeah.
Oh, man. So, dude, this has been a good talk. I like really appreciate you being patient. Speaking of being patient, I appreciate you being patient with me on me screwing up the recording the first time around. And I appreciate you coming on, talking about your game stuff and talking about your your painting stuff quite a lot. Like I said, I'm a huge fan. And now knowing that you had told me that Doom has a campaign mode and it has a single player mode, I have not played a first person shooter in forever because I just never wanted to play online games in that way. But knowing that there's a campaign mode, I'm gonna buy it and I'm gonna play it. Yeah, because I want to see the work you did for it.
I'll warn you that it's hard. So
the last Doom game was not only hard, but it was terrifying. So like I would play it in the dark and just scare the shit out of me. It was like playing a horror movie. I loved it. Yeah, and I'm curious to see the work that you did for it. And you'd mentioned that it was a little different than a regular game UI.
Right.
So I'm excited to check that out, and a new Doom game. So I'm definitely going to go check it out. And I will, like always, I'll the day that I post this episode, I'll post a bunch of your paintings so people can see your work and have a frame of reference from the conversation. And I'll let you. I mean, you're in Texas time, so it's getting late there. It's getting to be family time. So I'll let you go get back to your family and enjoy a couple more of those frosty beers I've been watching you drink, because I think I want one now.
Nice. All right, man.
All right, Dave. Thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate it. And I'll talk to you again soon.
All right. Later, man.